Let's talk about designer-developer communication. It'll only be 5 minutes, guys. Oops. As designers and engineers, we have what I like to think of as superpowers. We have the superpower to solve problems and make a meaningful contribution to the world around us. Us versus them? Never. The beauty of your collaboration is the different perspectives each discipline can bring to the table. Sharing skill sets and understanding each other is key to ensuring smooth working practices. We talk about empathy in design all the time. It applies here too. It applies to the designer-engineer working relationship just as much as it does to everything else. As a designer, investing in your relationship with engineers helps you to understand their process and how code works. And as an engineer, investing in your relationship with designers helps you to understand how users interact with the code you write and how to empathize with their needs. Working closely allows us to reduce unnecessary work and spend more time making cool stuff. The bottom line is communication. As well as encouraging empathy between designers and developers, it's also important to consider how we communicate our work to each other. Here are a few tips for both sides of the aisle on how to work more effectively together, and a few things that we do here at the Coop. Start at the beginning, and when you get to the end, stop. It's worth sharing knowledge and best practices from day one. This doesn't just apply to the start of a project. Communication between teams should be continuous throughout the product lifecycle. Kickoff sessions are a perfect opportunity for an intro to the tools and processes you'll be using. This includes enabling engineers access to Figma, introducing Anima, or whatever tools are being used to translate designs into specs, and going over how the handoff dynamics work. The start is just the beginning. Pull engineers in early and make it a habit. Setting up design reviews with the engineering team to go over your design should be the norm. Ideally, the team should follow in a weekly rhythm where designers bring what they're working on, high-level workflows, annotated designs, simple prototypes, etc., to a session with the team. Designers, explain to them why you made the design decisions you made, how it works, and ask them for feedback. This gives engineers the time to do any necessary research and get excited about what's coming next. Our current schedule has one built in every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. So this is a history bar example for Tux, and it's the example of how we annotate our designs to discuss with engineering. By clearly annotating the function and behavior of each labeled UI element, the engineers won't have to remember how this thing was supposed to work, and instead they can get straight to implementing. Designers, you guys have access to the annotation guidelines in the design library. If you think about it, developers are actually the first people to experience our product or our design. Treat the developer experience like the user experience. You can use annotations, as I mentioned before, but walking them through a prototype gives them the full picture. Now that you've shared your grand design in progress, the engineer may ask, how do I know which version of the design I should work on? And that's a legit question. Considering the designer might create multiple versions to try out what works best. We use freeze files. Designers, it's up to you to ensure the freeze file exists and that any new versions are worked on separately. Engineers should be notified, right? And if you haven't been notified, reach out. And you should get the link to the Figma file as well as you'll see that it says freeze file. So you'll always see that on the left-hand panel. Design is a two-way street. Engineers, don't be afraid to give feedback on technical constraints and limitations. Instead of just pushing back and saying this can't be done, always provide an alternative solution. Designers, listen with an open mind. You may learn something. Aside from scheduled meetings, check in often. Engineers, as you're implementing a design, make sure to consistently show the designer your progress. Keeping the designer up to date will help ensure that your implementation is up to expectations and there aren't any surprises down the road. As a team, we have tons of power to create at our fingertips. However, with great power comes great responsibility, and we couldn't do it without each other. Thanks, everyone.